If somebody is going to say that X is centered in this particular body, then that is not true, scientifically speaking. There's a book called Phantoms in the Brain by one V.S. Ramachandran. Now there he says how he has, this person is a neuroscientist and he is the head of a brain center in one of the universities in the United States. And he says how the body is made to believe, the person is made to believe, brain is made to believe that its body is somewhere else. How in certain cases, certain people have mistaken other people's limbs as their limbs. So that's what phantom limbs, when in accidents somebody's limbs are cut off accidentally, they can actually feel their limbs, which is not there. So from there he starts, and then he found so many things, and then he says that, you see, if somebody is going to say that a body is the limit of a person, then that is absurd. This is coming from a person who has got no training in spirituality or philosophy. Purely from scientific angle, that person has come to this conclusion. So that is what next? And only when this question arises, only when we are aware of suffering, when we are aware of the need to enter into a process, a journey of discovering further and further, will spirituality or religion be of any use. If you do not have this problem, if you do not understand that there is suffering, though you are in the midst of suffering, if you do not understand the gravity of the situation, then you don't have any use for the manual. And one interesting aspect of Indian spirituality is that we use the body and mind to understand the body and mind. Body and mind themselves are instruments to understand body and minds, and eventually to transcend them, to go beyond them. You can ask questions because it becomes very drone, dull.
Understanding is purely from the mind. Body doesn't take place in understanding process.
Body understands body in the sense when you train, that's what I was talking about martial arts. There is a fine difference. You see, like a fighter pilot, when a fighter pilot sees an object coming towards the plane, the pilot has to decide within a space of 1/100th of a second. That is not done by the thinking process. It's an instinct. So that instinct is actually injected into the body. The moment he sees, he does control the plane. Similarly, in most of the martial arts, you will see that the body is synchronized in such a way that the body can understand that some object is coming. It's not the person is, a knife is coming and the person automatically becomes like this. Now, so body understands the body. That's a wonderful question you asked, but it's true. Body does understand the body. You go to a person who is asleep, who is a martial arts expert, and you try to touch the person will immediately catch your hand. I mean, yeah, exactly. Now, yeah, exactly. Wonderful question. In Indian spirituality, mind is not something what we generally call as brain. There is a difference. So that is where Indian psychology differs from Western psychology. For Western psychology, all the emotions are nothing but some chemical reactions in the brain. But Indian psychology, which was founded by Maharishi Patanjali, will say otherwise. Because in Indian tradition, we believe that all the impressions, like I am talking to you, you are carrying some impression of this talk. That impression is held in your mind, and this mind is carried over from birth to birth. It does not find its locus in this body. So that's different.
Is the mind the same as the final body or the Shukshma body?
It's part of it. There are many other things, it's part of it. Mind is one part of that. So that goes from birth to birth. So body, when we are talking, actually body in Indian tradition includes the brain. It includes the brain. That's why understanding body and understanding mind in Indian tradition is little different. Not exactly as the Western psychologists will say. So you have death and understanding of death. There have been various traditions in the East to understand death. And slowly thought advances from the basic to the advanced. When we are afraid of the forces of nature, we defy them, as in the olden civilizations, fire god. Why in the Vedas? In the Vedas, in the beginning part, you will see that the forces of nature have been deified. They have been made into gods. There is Varuna, there is Agni, there is Vayu, Marut, all sorts of gods. Nothing but a deification of natural forces. And finally, at the end of the Veda, which is called Vedanta, you will find that there is the ultimate philosophy of the Upanishads, the sublime philosophy of the Upanishads. In the Veda, we find two divisions. One is the Karma Kanda and another one is the Jnana Kanda. Today, because I just wanted to have the feel of the whole exercise, and as Professor Mandal said, I had asked him what was actually going on here. So we'll just have a look at various things. On the face of it, it may appear little discordant, disarrayed, but then over the course of time you will understand. Now, Karma Kanda and Jnana Kanda. Karma Kanda, there are so many sacrifices to please gods so that they can help us get many things in life. Something like our technology. And Jnana Kanda Upanishads, which give us the secrets, which give us the truth of life and beyond. Something like science. And once we understand that the present state in which we live today is not sufficient, once we understand the inadequacy of this state, then there is a need, there is a want within us to go beyond this state or to find solutions. And when that happens, that is what in Sanskrit is called Vyakulata, when one becomes desperate. When one becomes desperate to find a solution out of all this quandary, all this halabulu, then they go to a guru, a teacher, who is a person who has already found a solution. And then they find or they venture into the journey to find this solution. Now, Gita actually is a classic example of our legacy where we do not separate the terrible and the beautiful. Gita is placed in a battlefield and it talks about killing. So, in the midst of the battlefield, how do we solve our problems? And the chapter, the first chapter, as I think Atma Priyanji would have told you, the Arjuna syndrome. Has he told you that? Arjuna syndrome. So, Arjuna Vishada Yoga, the despondency of Arjuna. That chapter is where most of us are today. Most of us actually live in that chapter. The rest of the chapters, maybe they may happen in our lives, but most of the time we are living in this first chapter. And Arjuna is a great philosopher. He gives a lot of logic unbelievable logic to explain his position, to justify his position. And most of us, we do that. Whenever somebody comes with some advice, we give ultimate logic to put down that person. So Arjuna did that long back. Now Gita gives us both these things. Lessons on how to focus on our body, lessons on how to focus our mind on the mind itself, and lessons on how to eventually get beyond both. Now this word focus is an interesting word. We have a lot of applications of this focus you might be aware of, in light particularly. Light, when it is focused, can produce tremendous effects like X-ray or laser. So focusing something. But our mind also, when it is focused, generates tremendous power. All these mentalists, that is some sort of magicians who use some kind of hypnosis or mental powers to, somebody asks you, okay, think a number and write it on a slip of paper and give it to your friend, and then you tell him that I have done, then he will tell you the number on some problem, something like that. They are called mentalists. So these mentalists, they have used their minds, they have focused their mind on their minds to generate tremendous power. Similarly, we can focus the mind to find out solutions to our problems, and they could be as trivial as they can be. One interesting thing here I would like to mention is about Google. See, very few people can live, and very few moments today can be lived without Google. Without Google, what would the world have been? I don't know. So, Google. Now it so happens that I have to stay in an office and do some work, or at least appear as though I am doing some work, So, now then what happens is somebody comes and says, hey, do you know this? Then I say, yeah, no problem, I can find it out for you. It's simple. And I just go to the Google and Google it, and it's there, bingo. Yeah, I give him. Then I say that, okay, because now you have to, otherwise you will be plagiarism and whatever, intellectual property rights. So I say that, see, I got it from the Google. Otherwise, so then the person listens, okay. And you will not believe there are about 4 or 5 people in our ashrama. They keep on coming with the same kind of questions to me. Every time I give them a response, I say that I got it from the Google. But again they come to me. They don't go to the Google. Interesting. One day I thought, yeah, it's almost like about 2 years or something. These people come back again and again to me. They don't go, because all those people have a desktop, and all of them have broadband and Google, of course, but they come to me. And what I type there is plain English. I don't know any Greek or Latin something. So I type plain English, but they come to me. So the very possibility that Google can be used to get solutions of this kind doesn't strike them. So the very possibility that our minds can be focused to, have a good relationship doesn't strike us. Oh, mind focusing yoga for such a normal thing? People usually think that yoga means suddenly he will sit and levitate, or may have a halo behind, something like that, I don't know. Some Mahatma kind of stuff. I don't know, but whomsoever says that is actually talking crap. He doesn't know what he is talking. Because yoga is not meant for that. Yoga is meant to achieve whatever you want to achieve. But the ultimate aim of yoga is to bring you out of this illusion. The whole thing is illusion. See? You say, oh, wonderful. You come and you talk, and then you torture us so much, and we are feeling sleepy and rubbing our eyes and yawning, and then you say it's all illusion. Wonderful. It's illusion. Then there is a still more bigger wonder that within this illusion there is illusion. There is optical illusion, and there is of course the politician's illusion. There are so many types of illusions. So this is also an illusion. So these yoga or Upanishads, these scriptures, their ultimate aim is to bring us out of this illusion. But before that, they will also help you to get whatever you want, if you want that. And they will also come with a disclaimer, mutual funds are subject to risk of market, blah, blah, blah. They tell it so fast that you don't understand whatever. So this disclaimer, they come with a disclaimer that if you are going to be caught up with all these things like successful relationship, then you will never attain the ultimate goal. You're going to be caught up here. What some people, some traditions call siddhis, some attainments. If you're going to be caught up with those attainments, you're not going to get the ultimate thing. If you're going to be satisfied with your graduation, then you're not going to be a researcher. You'll just go and find yourself a job and you will have 2 kids, that's all, end, period. So that is what these traditions tell us. Now we need to remember this Google thing to understand that there is nothing which can't be solved by the Indian spiritual tradition. Absolutely nothing. Only thing, we need to remember that always. We need to always remember that this possibility is there. And that's why Swami Vivekananda and later on Swami Ranganathananda used to always say, we have infinite possibilities within us. Infinite possibilities in every direction, in every sphere. We can do anything and everything what we want to. And where is the difference? Why are we not able to do that? Why are some of us able to and some not able to? The difference is in faith. You see the same Google thing? Those people, they are not believing that they can also go to the desktop and simply type into google.com and they will get the same answers. Because Google has no racial preferences or something, I don't know, at least. No age preferences, no preference. So simply they type and they get the answers. So this faith has to be there. We need tremendous faith in ourselves. What today, particularly youngsters, I also like to call myself young because I am, and most of us are young. So youngsters, you see, our problem is we see a lot of tragedy outside. We see a lot of terrible things outside, natural and unnatural. So we have lost faith. We have lost hope in goodness. And that is why our tradition, this Indian spiritual tradition, says that have hope in goodness, that you can be good and you can do good and you can make others also do good. And you have tremendous potentiality within you to achieve anything you want. There are a lot of alternatives in front of you, everything arranged in a platter. Now it's up to you to select what exactly you want. Whether you want something of this life, because obviously Indian spiritual tradition says that there is something hereafter. Okay, so whether you want to prosper here and also there, that also can be done, or whether you want to have only here and not elsewhere, that also can be done, or whether you want to be here simply keeping quiet and prosper in the hereafter. Like many great souls, when they are alive, they are poor, nobody bothers about them, and then when they pass away, there are so many foundations in their name, so many statues, and some crows putting something on the statues. So all these things happen. When a person is great, Mahapurush, means he didn't have anything to eat when he was alive. That's one of the criteria to become a Mahapurush. So our tradition says that if you want to become a Mahapurush like that, okay. But if you want to be somebody who will be achieving in this world and hereafter, that's also okay. Everything is there. Solutions are there. It's up to you to apply them in your life. So we need these solutions here and now. Not in a place or in a time 20 years hence, when, like in Kathopanishad, so eloquently the sage puts it, when you become useless. The father of Nachiketa is donating some cows, I mean, which can't give any milk and totally gone. So those kinds of cow. Because some people, of course, they donate things to some of our ashramas. Wonderful things. Swamiji, you take this computer. What? It's an old computer. Old computer, probably when that was invented, computer technology was invented. Of no use. And something all broken and all that. They show that charity. So that way they can keep the score of charity also and get rid of those things. Now, if you become like those cows, your teeth broken, unable to do anything. Anything means unable to enjoy. Sri Ramakrishna once told this about renunciation, that when you are unable to, he told it in a very rustic language, when you are unable to enjoy, you give up. When you are no more able to drink because you can't, you say, I quit drinking. See how nice. So that is what we are aiming at. No, you have to do it now, because by controlling yourself, by disciplining yourself, you will be able to achieve more and give more back to the society from which you are getting. There's a whole idea of sacrifice in our tradition. We get food, we get love, we get knowledge from this society, and we should give it back to the society. And if you don't, nature will take it from you. How? High blood pressure, cholesterol, triglyceride. Wherever you go, you find this word, triglyceride. Lipid profile करा लिया क्या? नहीं कराया. अरे triglyceride हो जाएगा. And this is very wonderful. Apollo hospitals, every year they will give you a big bill, maintenance charges. So they will do all this diagnostics under the sun and then tell you are okay, which you knew already. But they will tell you anyway. Because there was a patient, after the operation, the patient came out and the doctor said, patient is died, patient is dead. And the patient said, no, I am alive. Keep quiet. Who is the doctor? Who is the doctor? I am the doctor. Keep quiet. So we should understand that I don't need this troubleshooting manual, I don't need these solutions when anyway I am not going to have any trouble at all. So there are so many aspects. The whole idea of being aware of our suffering, the whole idea of being aware of our limitations should creep in. Because we are not understanding, you see. Just imagine if I could manipulate all the minds sitting here. Because I don't have such great mind. So if I could manipulate all the minds sitting here, what a tremendous thing it would be. If I could manipulate 100% of my brain, what a tremendous thing it would be. We don't understand the significance of that. We don't understand the actual extent of that, and that's why we don't want to. If I had no suffering, say, anybody watching movies can understand, there is a dawn and they say, okay, a very, very good, faithful, non-corrupt policeman, probably they are only in the movies. So policeman who is not corrupt and very faithful, and this person comes and then this person somehow finds out that that policeman's daughter is studying in some falana college. So, and then the dawn says that, okay, this daughter has been kidnapped. So now, okay, now this fellow will listen to me, whatever. Do anything to me but not to the daughter. Very common dialogue. Just imagine if you have no weakness. If somebody comes and tells you that your daughter is with me, okay, no problem. I mean, I don't know how many of us can tell that, but just imagine somebody is going to come and show you a revolver and you say, okay, go ahead. We all know of the story of Alexander, who came here to India, found a lot of wisdom in a sage and said, come along with me. Come with me to my place. Then the sage said, nothing doing, I'm happy here with my loincloth, sitting here, meditating. So, he said, no, come. He said, no, I will not. He said, I will kill you. Then the sage laughed and said, you don't know what you are talking. You can't kill me. You may destroy this body, but you can't kill me. How much power comes, you see, He can simply tell like that with a loin cloth, with a kaupina, nothing on his body. He can tell that to an emperor of the stature of Alexander. I don't bother. Just imagine if we can work without having any botheration about the result of the work. How much we can produce? I'm talking in the material terms. I'm not bothered. I'm just going on working and working and working, innovating further and further. How much more we can produce? The very possibility, the very idea actually thrills me, because we can do wonders. But most of us are bogged down by ifs and buts. If this does not click, if every money goes away, if everything is lost,